How's everybody doing? Can you hear me back there? Yeah. All right. So welcome to the 92nd Street Y. We are really excited today because we have not only members of the cast of FBI who are here, but we have the legendary Dick Wolf, creator of FBI, and one of the longest running television programs in American history, Law and Order. Welcome. The longest. Fake news already. My name is Vladimir Duthiers. I'm a correspondent for CBS News, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 92nd Street Y for this discussion with the cast and the creator of FBI. So I will briefly introduce everybody, although I don't think they need any introduction, but please give a warm round of applause to Miss Sela Ward, Mr. Dick Wolf, Jeremy Sisto, and Ebonée Noel. All right. So we're going to make this a very fluid discussion. I'm going to ask the cast a couple of questions, and then we will open it up to you. I know we have a lot of fans here, clearly, because you paid good money to be here. And so we're going to first start off with Mr. Dick Wolf. I don't know if you know this, and maybe the audience doesn't know this because they're not glued to their phones the way that I am, but right before I left the CBS News Broadcast Center, news broke that a Coast Guard officer was just arrested. It happened about a week ago, but we're only getting the information now from the FBI, was arrested with a large cache of weapons, and he had a target list of prominent politicians, mostly Democrats, I think all Democrats, and journalists that he was targeting. And in this little manifesto, and this is sort of still coming into me, so I may get some of the facts wrong, but the broad strokes of what we learned is that he was planning on taking some people out with those weapons. He was planning on using some kind of biological agent or weapon on food. And I remember as I watched this, and I knew I was coming to talk to the creator of FBI, and I thought to myself, this is an entire episode of FBI in just one house that they found, right? This guy was gonna blow things up, he was gonna shoot people, and he was gonna spray food on a salad bar, which was, if you guys have been watching the show, is exactly what has happened over the course of this season. And so, so my first thought was, when I first started watching FBI, my first thought, Dick, was that this is a scary world that we live in. And what was your thought process into why you wanted to bring this show to the air?
Well, it was 3 years ago, and we started dealing with the FBI.
I want to use.
Sorry. It was about more than that, 4 years ago, that we started dealing with the FBI, where we had an embedded crew in the New York headquarters who literally were in there for a year, shooting real agents, real situations, and every day it's a new war. That the FBI has basically a zero tolerance for terrorist acts for the simple reason that it's not a good day when one takes place, and their job is to be there and interdict and arrest and work against basically the worst people on the planet. The need for, wherever you go in the world, the FBI is the foremost law enforcement agency. It is unparalleled. It has offices all around the world. It is knowledgeable about thousands of people that you never want to even know exist. And the dedication, one of the things that I've pointed out to people in the, whatever it is, 100 years of one version or another of the Bureau, there has been one agent who was indicted for murder, and aside from that, there has never been an FBI agent arrested for corruption or spying or anything that works against the larger interests of America. And they are uncle was an FBI agent, and it was a very good role model, but it was also something that when I was a kid, it was 5 or 6. I didn't know how anybody could do this job, and he was a hero. But if you look around at people who know agents, they are literally the best and the brightest. There's a 1% success rate for applicants to even get into Quantico. So it's an incredible group of people from every walk of American life, every background. It's a fascinating group of people who are totally dedicated.
Yeah. So from time to time, you're going to see me sort of fanboying over the folks that are sitting here on the stage with me, because I've been a big fan of yours and Law & Order going back to the very beginning. Sela Ward, who just recently played like the President of the United States, right, Independence Day, but who I remember watching Sisters, fans of Sisters, right? Has won an Emmy, has won a Golden Globe. Your character is really interesting. What do you think about when you're playing Dana Mosier? What do you bring? What do you try to infuse the character with?
First of all, I love how strong this woman is and how good she is. And it's not because she's a woman, but I love that she's a woman and in charge in really predominantly a male world, thanks to Dick. He always puts women in great, strong leads. Yeah, very much so. It's interesting to play a character like that because you are directing men, you are in charge, you're dealing with life and death, you're dealing with hierarchy politically, and it's you try at least I try very hard not to veer away from the cliche, to walk a line of just a principled woman doing her best with great integrity at a job.
Is it hard when you realize the world that we're living in right now, which is very different than it was maybe even 5 years ago with the rise of the Me Too movement, the fact that women are demanding equal pay for equal work, and now you are playing a character that has an enormous responsibility over agents, both men and women?
I think that it's a very interesting time, not only because of the Me Too movement, but I think that women, particularly in television, now that you've seen this shift from features being big blockbuster hits, and you don't have any of those really middle budget movies like you used to in great numbers anymore. So all the wonderful roles are on television for women, and they are some fabulous roles. And I'm also looking at the art world, and there's a resurgence of really looking at female painters and their influence where they've been unrecognized for so many years. And I'm just watching all of these cultural elements dovetail and thinking, wow, it is a time for women, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, time's up, as Oprah said. Jeremy Sisto. You're this serious actor. You've played so many varied roles over the course of your career, but for those of us of a certain age, we remember Elton. Do you remember? Who here is a Clueless fan? And I interviewed, right? I interviewed Amy Heckerling, and she had some very nice things to say about the time on the set and everything, but I've been a huge fan of yours for many, many years. Your character is more complicated than I originally thought. When I first started watching the show, the first couple of episodes, I thought, okay, here's the guy who gets the information that something bad is happening out there, and he marshals the forces of the FBI to figure out what's going on. But then your arc has gotten a little bit more complicated.
I thought it was all about his pencil.
Right, exactly right. And it turns out that it's not.
It's a lot about the pencil. Yeah, I mean, that's a quality of Dick's storytelling in that you get to know these characters first in how they operate in their job, and his job is complicated. It's one of the amazing things to me when I got to visit the FBI office and talk to the agents was how connected they are to all the other agencies in the city, how much respect there is given to them, and how they have an ability to dig deeper than any other agency, not only because of their connectivity to other agencies, but because of their own agents and analysts within the bureau itself. And so, but the environment within that space is, there's a lot of camaraderie. It's a real family. It's a feeling of, when we went to visit, they're giving each other, a hard time. They're teasing each other. They spend a lot of time together. They're in this office. They're grinding it out together, and that kind of relationship is super fun to sort of see. But as I was saying with Dick's shows, you see the characters first in how they operate, how they relate to each other when they're trying to get this job done, and so when there are moments that you get to see who the character is, it's really gratifying, I think, for an audience. And what's the term you always use with not with a small, with a teaspoon, or with the, you have some.
We don't pour character into characters with soup ladles, demi-tablespoons.
That's right. I don't know that word, so I've always.
Yeah, but you got to hold your pinky.
You got to hold the pinky eye, yeah. And so, yeah, it's fun. It's fun for us too. And we've had a few different teams of writers kind of coming onto the show, and everyone sort of is kind of operating through Dick, trying to find the voices, and each writer brings their own sort of ideas, and so Jubal has come together in a really interesting way. I think he's fun to watch. He's got a lot of energy, and he does have. He's starting to take form. His backstory is starting to take form to be a pretty intriguing character. So I'm happy to play him.
Did you meet the real life counterpart who does your job at the FBI here in New York, and what was that like?
Yeah, he's great. I hang out with him sometimes. He's a really cool guy. He's very funny, very. It's funny when you go out with when I went out with him, my observations were the hierarchy within the bureau is clear. Everyone knows who's above, but if you're watching from outside view, you can't really tell. It's kind of all sort of a subtle sort of thing. The way they actually relate to each other is and this guy is sort of the epitome of that. He treats everyone the same. He's self-deprecating and he's off the cuff the way he talks. It doesn't seem like he could be anybody on the street. But then but you also, if you watch him close enough, you see he has an ability to really to meet someone and to instill a sense of trust and a sense of like knowing that person, a feeling of disarming that person, and so it's a really interesting guy. And this is a different character, but it was sort of inspired by him.
Really fascinating. Ebonée, I read an article somewhere where you said that your character, Kristen, is the connective tissue of the squad.
Yes.
Just take me through that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, we have our two agents who are on the street, and they're reacting first to whatever the event is of the episode. We have our boss who's sort of coordinating with the higher-ups, making sure what needs to happen happens, and directing us in certain ways. We have Jubal, who's running the jock. And Kristen is able to look at the cases from analytical perspective to take all of these disparate pieces of information and find the connections. So we have two victims and we don't know how they're connected or why somebody might be motivated to go after them both, right? So her job is to take all of the information she can glean about those two people, run it back, turn over every rock, check their profiles, do whatever she can to figure out how they connect, right? And then to bring that information to the agents, to her boss, to Jubal, so that we can all get together and figure out what the next step is.
So I know that you have been educated sort of all over the world.
Yes.
But were you a techie before you took on this role? Or not only did you have to go through like training at Quantico, but you also had to learn like all this technology that you're not familiar with?
Well, I was not personally a techie, but I have two people who are very close to me. One of my best friends who's like complete science nerd, and then a friend from college who was really into computer analytics and programming. And just because I'm a curious person and I cared about them, I took the time to learn about what it is they're passionate about. Not because of this show, just through life. And then it ended up helping me with this show because I do use a lot of technical jargon, and I have to talk about, how computers work, how the signals work, what timestamps, how things are connected, and it just was sort of baked in, I guess.
Yeah, that's cool. Dick, why do you think these procedurals resonate with people? They have resonated with people for so long. Because you have a fascination with law enforcement. You talked about your uncle being an FBI agent, but clearly the rest of us are deeply fascinated with the work that police officers and federal law enforcement agents do.
I'm sorry, I lost track of the question.
Why do you think that these shows are so popular?
Resonate?
Yeah, they resonate with
I
people.
think procedurals have a unique place because, oh God, it's hard. Procedurals have a unique place in the landscape of television, and obviously I'm a huge fan because I love good storytelling and I like closed-ended shows, which means that if you watch for an hour, you get a complete story with a beginning, middle, and an end. And it's been proven with both Law and Order and SVU that people don't care in marathons. They're now doing sort of theme marathons on SVU, but Ion runs years. But for the most part, the episodes are interchangeable, and it's because it's comfort food. It's designed to be comfort food. It's designed to, if you're sitting at home, you can tune in, and if you have an hour, you'll see a complete story. If you have 4 hours and are watching a marathon, you'll see 4 completely different stories, but they share a desire to take the viewer on a journey every week. And I think, I started out watching Dragnet, and they've fascinated me ever since because there's a black and white morality that is reassuring, and 98% of the time the bad guys are taken down by the cops at the end of the episode. That was one of the things that made Law and Order infinitely interesting, is when they'd lose a case in court, because that disturbs the rhythm, which is good if you do it 3 or 4 times a season, but not if it happens too often. It's always bridging a gap in the audience's mind. You want more character? This isn't really the show, but if you want a great story, they work.
One of the things that you have an incredible knack for is picking these incredible actors to bring your vision to the screen. And you've had like Academy Award winners like Diane Wiest and United States senators, right? Like Fred Thompson. And for years when I was growing up and I was watching Law and Order, I thought like Adam Schiff was the district attorney for Manhattan. And I almost imagined that that's what they were like, and that's how crusty they were. I didn't imagine like some of the smooth talkers that we've seen actually that exist in the real world. But what are you generally looking for when you're writing and developing these shows? And
In the casting stage,
Yeah.
you're always looking for the same thing, which is actors who tell the truth.
who tell the truth through their art.
Through their art. That's why you watch them.
Yeah.
Because there is, with the good ones, Stephen Hill sort of exemplified it for me when he was the only actor I actually have ever dealt with who consistently asked for fewer lines.
Really?
Absolutely. I don't need all these words. And he was right, because he communicated, you knew who he was. He always had the right answer, even when it was make the deal. But he was the ultimate pragmatist in a system that wouldn't exist properly without it. And it was in his eyes. He'd just say, just watch my eyes.
Wow, that's incredible. Sela, what's it like to work in New York? I mean, that's another thing that Dick is known for, which is, he revitalized essentially the the filmmaking processes in New York City, and so many. I'm sure even I know so many people who have been extras in Law and Order, who on street scenes, and of course certain New Yorkers are like, oh my God, they're filming Law and Order again on my street. I gotta deal with the parking issues. But what's it like to film in New York?
This is my third project, I think, to film in New York, and I've always loved it. I lived here in my 20s, and that's such a formative time. So for me, I kind of got stuck in California for 30-something years.
Stuck.
I did. I'd be on shows for 6 years and 4 years,
Yeah.
and you have children, and you're in school, and you know how that goes. But I just couldn't wait to come back to New York. It just feels like home. And filming here, I think, is just great, especially being out on the streets.
Yeah, but it's interesting. You've written a book about balancing being from a small town in Mississippi and living and working and making a life and a living in a big city. What have you discovered from Mississippi to New York and in between?
I thought that I thought it would be interesting to explore, because I certainly felt that I wasn't the only person who had come from a small town and went to either coast and lived in a big city, diametrically opposed to how you grew up, and that sense of community and belonging is something that is so in your bones when you grow up that way. And how do you find that in these large metropolises, right? And I thought that was an interesting theme to explore. And I realized, though, that it's all about people. It's just all about connecting with people and finding your tribe of people, and that's really what makes anywhere a home, that and your family. So it took me going back there and leaving to figure that out.
Yeah, that's cool. Jeremy, one of the things I'm always curious about, this is not your first Dick Wolf project. So explain to the audience what it is. We've heard Dick talk about what he thinks is important for the show and for the actors. What, as an actor, as an artist, what is it about Dick that makes you come back, that made you want to come back to work with him?
Yeah, there's a lot. But one of the other things that what Dick did for New York is it really supported theater actors for 20 years. So many great actors were able to survive because they could get a spot on one of the Law and Order shows, and so it's great to have this new franchise back in and for the community of actors. But yeah, for me, I've told Dick this before. It's any project you're on, you feel. Definitely lately, there's so many projects out there. There's so many TV shows out there that there is not enough creators or showrunners or whatever you call them, figureheads that can keep those ships upright and solid and sturdy. And I've been on a few of those, and it's chaotic. It's not a place that you want to come to work every day, but with Dick's shows, there is a real stability there, and it's like a family. And the moment I signed back onto this one, I felt that because it trickles down from the top. So, for me, just to be a part of a project that has that kind of those bones, it's a good feeling.
Yeah, it's fun to go back and watch, you can, on stream some of the early episodes of Law and Order and find people who had really small parts in Law and Order who then blew up and became a big deal in Hollywood because they had that opportunity to be on one of your shows.
Yeah, that was fun to watch. And when we were on with my Jesse or Anthony, yeah. We would a new actor. We could get 5 actors a day coming in and crying about something, and we'd be we'd bet on who would we had some good ones too.
I've said for years, I'm sure people in this audience still go to the theater, but if you go to the theater and you run across an actor who does not have a Law and Order credit, it means
what have they been up to their whole lives?
No, it means he just got off the bus or he really sucks.
Ebonée, one of the things, I mean, I had the pleasure of interviewing Seco and Missy early before the show started, and one of the things we talked about in our interview is the diversity that this cast was going to bring to television, and that there would be not only women, but people of color, of different religions, in really important positions. Give us a sense of that for you as an actress and as a performer on the show, and what you're seeing as far as representation.
You mean on our show?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, we could just talk about my role, just even alone. I think one of the things that was so exciting at the beginning of this was I was playing a young black woman in an environment with a lot of smart people with positions of authority, but who respected her and listened to her and valued her because of her intelligence, which is not something that I saw in a lot of scripts. And I think, you know, even as a young girl, like I was a nerd like Kristen is, and I loved school and got good grades, but I didn't see somebody who looked like me who was on the television that I could relate to in that sense. And I just think, you know, that's important. You go to school and people might tease you for being the smarty pants, and everybody wants to listen to everything you have to say. And I think it's important to have somebody who looks like me who's represented in this extremely powerful and very highly valued way. It means a lot to me alone, so I can only hope that it means the same to other people. And I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, my daughter, you know, she loves your character. And, you know, that's what, you know, means the most to me, is like little girls who look like me, who see me and they're like, oh, okay, I recognize that. That's, I think,
Yeah,
why we
and it's also interesting too, because there have been, you know, people of color, women of color who've had roles, but to me what I thought was really fascinating is you're not like a door kicker. Right? You're like the brains. You're like doing things that, you know, a lot of people can kick doors in. A lot of people can chase leads as good investigators, but it takes a special kind of person, a special level of intelligence to be the person who's analyzing data.
Yes, it does.
Even for us reporters, like, you know, the reporter who can be a good data-driven reporter, who can analyze data, financial balance sheets, court records, those are not, you can interview what we call man on the street. That's generally easy, right? But it's the data and the part that's hard.
And they're thinking in a different way. I mean, the intelligence analysts in the FBI are thinking on a different level than, I don't want to say anything about the street agents, but they're just seeing the case from a different perspective. And I spoke when we got to meet a couple of FBI agents. I met an analyst, and I said, "How do you know that you are like killing it at your job?" And she said, "When I can give my agent something that allows them to go on the street and further the case, that's when I'm having like an amazing day at work." And so I just try to bring that to the character and show that on the screen and say, look, these people are just as smart. She might not carry a gun. She might not be arresting people or putting people in handcuffs or interrogating them, but she's crucial. So, you know, don't sleep on the analyst.
Like that. Yeah, and Dick, I mean, just going back to even, you know, earlier in the franchise in Law & Order, you've always cast people of color in really important positions. And I think the reason I'm curious about this is because, you know, we live in a country where there are a lot of people who sometimes do not feel an affinity towards law enforcement agents. They, you know, a lot of people, and I've always sort of defined it by, it depends on what your interaction with law enforcement folks are when you're growing up, right? So, for example, for me, I grew up wanting to be a police officer, so I never saw some of the things that some of my friends saw and felt. But when you watch Law & Order and when you watch FBI and you see people who are assistant district attorneys or who have decision or who are police captains, was that a conscious decision on your part even back then, before all the things that we're talking about in 2019?
Oh yeah, I mean, Paitha, one of the watershed moments in
Right? I heard somebody clapping.
Law & Order was I got a call after the third season, or almost at the end of the third season, from Warren Littlefield, and said, "Hi, the show's doing really well. I'm giving you a cancellation notice a year early unless you put women in the show." And the first 3 years, it was 6 guys. And we brought in Paitha and Jill Hennessy, and they both turned out to be very fortuitous hires. Apatha's, there's a whole string of the longest running black actress in the history of television, the longest running cop in the same role in the history of television. It was a pretty good run. Jill obviously went on and got her own show, but it was a decision that was forced on us, but I saw it as a huge opportunity to do something that there had never been a black woman police captain that anybody could even remember.
Right.
And to have her as, the pivot in the first half of the show was enormously valuable. Look how many detectives she commanded over the years. I mean, Law and Order there were 6 actors in the ensemble, and 29 actors went through the show. And this is not pearls before swine. I have to tell you, you and Anthony were still 2 of my top picks. And obviously, well, you see, you didn't mention the one that I knew him from, which was 6 Feet Under.
6 Feet Under, of course, yeah, of course.
And there are very few people over the years that I've gone in and talked to Peter and Arthur, who are on the ground every day, saying that that guy, and it was when 6 Feet Under was on. I said, that guy we got to get someday. So it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
It really has.
It's fantastic. We're going to open it up to your questions in just a minute, but before we do that, FBI has been renewed for a 2nd season. Congratulations. And there is a spin-off show that is happening. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
It's called FBI.
Microphone, Mr. Wolf.
Sorry. That's usually hanging. No, it's called FBI Most Wanted, and it's about the warrant squad, which go after people on the FBI's most wanted list, and they're very successful at it. And I don't want to give the wrong statistic, so I won't say how many cases there have been, but they have, when they focus on an individual who is on the list, they've had a 96% closure rate. So it's the unit that goes after literally the worst of the worst. And Julian McMahon, who many of you may remember from Nip Tuck, is number 1 on the call sheet. So we start shooting tomorrow.
Excellent. Congratulations. All right, so this first question, which is, I heard there's a spin-off in the works. I'm a great journalist. I just asked that question. I knew it before you even wrote it. This one, though, I've always wanted to know this. How do you choose your locations? Who Googles some of the locations after you see them appear on the black screen there? How do you choose the locations, or do you?
Every single one.
Yeah, right.
No, look, when we've been doing this continuously in New York, had a series it's coming up on 30 years now. And the location departments, many of whom have come from one of the other shows, are unabashedly certainly the best in New York. That was one of the things that everybody was desperate to save when Law and Order shut down, were the location files.
That's hilarious.
The thing that we couldn't let go.
Jeremy, this one is for you. Who is the best guest star you've worked with on a Dick Wolf show?
What's that dude's name? He was in Star Wars and Girls and tall, lanky dude.
Adam
Driver.
Yeah.
He was
Driver on Law and Order?
He was an episode before. He had just done one weird little movie that I watched after he worked on us because I was impressed. He was a very strange dude, sweet, but kind of just had a lot going on. And it was the one scene where me and Anthony always has a very good time and brings a lot of energy and is super fun to work with. But when certain actors were in there, they kind of take over the space with just whatever is going on with them. And he was one of those guys that we were just kind of quiet watching, not sure what was going on with him. And so I don't know. After he left, I was really impressed with him, and I went and watched that thing. And so that's the one that comes to mind. But there are a ton. There were a lot of people, a lot of guys, a lot of women and men that also I haven't heard from again that were really impressive and turned in some amazing work. But that was a real joy. I don't get that as much on this one because I'm in the office a lot. But that was one of the highlights of working on Law and Order as a detective.
Yeah. Sela, can I ask you about Hope Village real quickly and what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Tell
you.
the audience what that is, because it's a sort of fascinating charity, and just to describe where the inspiration for it came from.
I have just a real soft spot in my heart for children, and this is a home for abused and neglected kids that I founded back in the year 2000 in Meridian, Mississippi, where I'm from. There were two brothers at this emergency shelter in town, and they were, 9 and 12, and there was nowhere in the state to keep them together that had room to keep them together, and they had already been split up from their sisters. Their sisters were in different homes in different parts of the state. The parents' rights were terminated. And there was something about these two little boys that just pulled on my heartstrings. They had such two African-American boys that had such sparkle, and in Mississippi, I knew that if somebody could take them right then and really help foster their well-being and possibility, these would be the most amazing, productive kids. Well, they were about to be sent to two different homes, and they were like that. They were all they had left in the world, and being one of 4 children, I couldn't imagine that. You've been ripped from everything you know, and particularly your brothers and sisters. So our mandate was to keep siblings together, and that's what we've done, no matter, even if it's 6 kids. And for me, it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done, and near and dear to my heart, and where all my time and energy goes when I'm not working with Dick Wolf.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Ebonée, I have a question because your parents were not born in this country.
No, they weren't.
My parents were not born in this country. For years and years and years, I had to explain to my mother, she would say, writing is a hobby, it's not a job. And I would say, no, writing is a hobby, it's called journalism. Yes, 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 but you need to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. I think a lot of first-generation Americans have parents who think in this country to be successful, you've got to be a lawyer, an engineer, or a doctor, and everything else is a hobby or something that you do to, waste time. And how did you, when you decided that you wanted to be an actor, what did you tell your parents and how did they react?
Oh, that's a great question. I decided I wanted to be an actor when I was 4. It was really my mother's fault because, she would take me to see Broadway shows on special occasions. So the week before my 4th birthday, she always tells the story that way, she took me to see Beauty and the Beast on Broadway, and I was like, oh, adults sing and dance on stage, and that's a job, so I'm gonna do that job. And I think, I stuck with it my whole life, I'm gonna be an actor, I'm gonna be a singer, and my mom, I think, just sort of entertained me, but I was a very smart little girl, and she figured I would grow out of that, and I would go to school and be in the sciences or be a lawyer. And when we got to college application time and she realized that I was serious and I wouldn't give it up, she really tried to convince me that I could act or sing on the weekends as a hobby. And I would say to her, because she loves Sidney Poitier, I said, what if somebody told Sidney Poitier that he should just act on the weekends, Mom? And she'd be like, well, you should be a lawyer because then you could act in the courtroom. And I said, I'll be an actor.
That's a great response from a parent. You can act in the courtroom.
Yes.
Love it.
I said, I'll be a lawyer on TV, Mom. So I was determined. She couldn't fight me down.
That's so great. Okay, let me throw this one to Jeremy. Jeremy, do you find yourself, this is kind of this is an esoteric question, but do you find yourself analyzing strangers because of your role on FBI? Like looking at people suspiciously, I guess, and wondering what they're up to at the salad bar with an aerosol can.
That I would worry about. No, but I think that's one of the things our show does well is and one of the things that's interesting about being in law enforcement of all kinds is you're dealing with some real messed up people, and then you go home to your own life and you have to try to find some kind of balance there. And I think Missy and OA play that very well. Play sort of the sensitivity, the what that does to a person, and it does change your outlook on everything in your own life. I have a friend who's an ER doctor, and everywhere we go, he's looking around for accidents because all day long he sees these horrible things. So it's I'm sure it's a challenge in real life to have that outlook and to be constantly reminded of how messed up people can be and how bad people can be, and so I think it takes a certain constitution. And personally, I don't know if I could do it in real life, but I can definitely think about it and portray it as an actor, and I think it's interesting to play. And again, I give a lot of credit to the writers and to the other actors for sort of telling that story, that it does pay a toll. It does take a toll. I mean, and yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Although it does make me think of that story, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I read somewhere years ago that when Dustin Hoffman was acting with Laurence Olivier in Marathon Man, he said something like, I spent like 3 weeks starving myself to get into this role, and Olivier said, well, you could also try acting, which in other words, like, yeah, you play this, hotshot FBI agent, but you're acting, and
yeah, it's way easier than actually doing the
Right.
FBA job.
Yeah. So Dick, one of the things we've been giving a lot of love to New York City because this is a New York City crowd, but I guess there's somebody here from the Windy City or somebody who's a big fan of the Chicago series, right? There we go. So Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, Chicago PD. So the question is, why Chicago?
Because the company had been shooting here at that point for 28 years continuously, 4 or 5 shows. We had used every location in New York that was recognizable, and my roommate from boarding school lived outside of Chicago, and I went there for the first time when I was about 15 or 16, and I thought it was a great city. I mean, they sailed, and it was right on the lake, and it seemed like a really nice place. And I went back and was literally blown away. You take the river tour, which goes down the river, and it's an architectural tour, and it unquestionably has the greatest modern architecture in America. I got in a lot of trouble because we had the 100th episode of PD press event in Chicago, and I was there, and a reporter asked me, what do you think of Chicago? I said, I love Chicago. It's like a cleaner, politer New York with slightly heavier people. And I said, that's certainly something that doesn't bother me. I think the portions in the restaurants are fabulous. And within 10 minutes, it was online, Dick Wolf comes to Chicago, insults residents. So I still stand by my previous statement. I love the way they eat.
That's great. So Sela, this is a question, I guess. It's a general question, but I think it would be interesting for the audience to know. How long does it take to film an episode? And specifically, I guess, how long does it take to film your scenes? You're here quite a bit, even though I think you live in LA, right?
No, I'm based here now.
You're
I
based
wasn't
here?
kidding. This is like home.
Oh,
for
this is
me.
home for you
When
now.
I'd film in New York, I saw it as LA, I saw it as a place to work, not to live, and I'd hop on the plane, I'd come back to New York. Or I'd go to see my mom and daddy in Mississippi. So I'm based here now. Yeah,
Okay.
very happily.
Okay.
I have no idea how many days it takes to shoot this show. I'm very confused. we often shoot 2 shows at one time.
You mean like you'll come in and you'll do a bunch of scenes for one show, and then you'll like do a costume change or whatever, and then do another
We
show?
might, or the next day we'll do a different show.
Wow.
How many days do we shoot, Dick?
It varies.
He's not going to say. He
I
doesn't-
mean, it's supposed to shoot in 8 days.
In 8 days.
But look, to achieve a certain level of quality, and the studios actually even understand this, that the first season of a show, we do a lot of reshooting. That you look at it and you know, it doesn't quite work. And you look at the expense of reshooting and go, oh, this is too expensive. And then you realize because it's in our collective brain that we're looking at stuff and becoming more dissatisfied with the stuff that doesn't work. And we end up having to pick it up. And Sela, you should be glad we've done up to 3 shows at the same time, picking up pieces.
That's great.
That's Ice-T, actually, who has a very unique viewpoint on almost everything that we were doing a panel, and somebody said, well, how do you like the crossovers? He said, the crossovers, what do you mean? I say, well, you went to Chicago on a show. He said, to be on Chicago PD. He went, yeah. He said, you know, it's a plane ride, and you got to get off, and then you go in there, and you don't know anybody, and they say, stand here, say these lines. So I do it, but I really love being in New York and deal with that stuff.
That's great.
But look, all of this stuff, I wish we could run shows that, you know, they only shot 10 hours, 8 days, and out. And I look forward to that happening.
Look forward to that day. I can tell you, I did, I mean, occasionally they'll have reporters play reporters on TV shows, and I did one for the Amazon show with the Tom Clancy series that is shooting.
The Jack Ryan.
Jack Ryan. And I was playing a reporter, but my father is French, and so French is my mother language. So my agent says, hey, they want you to be a French reporter. And I'm like, okay. And so they send me the script, and it's not long, but it's all in French. And so I get there at they tell me to get there at 8 o'clock. And 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm still sitting there for this 4-sentence thing that I have to do. And then they finally say, okay, Vlad, come on in. And I go in, and they take photographs of my cufflinks, and a lot of weird stuff going on. And I have no idea what's happening. There's 1 million people all around, and they say, sit at this desk. And I read the copy a couple of times, and then I do it. And then they go, okay, thanks very much. And I'm like, is that it? They're like, yeah. I'm like, you're probably not going to use that, right? He's like, oh, no, I have to use it. We need this scene. And I was like, okay. And it took 8 hours. It was 2 minutes of talking. Is that
There's
I don't
a
know.
lot of waiting around on a television set. It's just
Yeah.
part of the deal.
Hurry up and wait.
Yeah, hurry up and wait. Yeah, it was pretty fun.
People are always like, can I come visit? I'm like, it's
so
not as
boring,
much
right?
fun as you think.
Oh, it's so great. I got paid well, though. It was a lot of money for 20 minutes of work. Well, 8 hours of my time, but it was pretty not too shabby. Ebonée, if you could be, this is a question from the audience, if you could be any position in the FBI, what would it be and why?
She wants my job.
Yeah, right. You want to be the boss.
I was just gonna say I'd like to be the boss. Who would I be and why? I mean, I really love playing an intelligence analyst. I feel like if I were choosing in real life, I might go into that just because I love being the smarty pants in the room. But I don't want to be, that to be a, cheap answer. So I would say I would like to be a street agent, only because I think interviewing and or interrogating people seems like such an interesting art to me, and I would love to test that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were so great in that episode where you went undercover.
Oh, thank
on the streets.
I was doing my best to play somebody who wasn't too great at it, but you know, still like keeping cool.
That could be in your future.
Yeah. Hint, hint.
Maybe she knows something that you don't know.
She already did it in the pilot. She
That's
saved
true.
300
That's
people's
true.
life.
That's true.
Very true. So this is still staying with production, Dick. This question asks, do you devise the basic story for each episode, or is this left to the writers?
It's left to our really incredible writers. I mean, we've got right now 5 shows on the air, and I assure you, I would not be writing scripts or they wouldn't be on. And a lot of the people, the thing that is amazingly satisfying is that a lot of the people have been together for a long time. Renee, who I mentioned, started as a staff writer on Law & Order in the first season, so we've been working together almost constantly. It's coming up on 30 years next year. And most of the people that are in senior positions, or a lot of them, have been there more than 10, more than 15, more than 20 years. Rick Eade, who is running FBI right now and came in under very difficult positions, has been on various shows, including Law & Order, for the past 15 years. So everybody does have a shorthand for catastrophe when things are really going south. We've known each other, all of us, for a long time.
So we're gonna get through all these because there's only 2 left, and so these are the last 2 questions for the night. But I think we can get through these. What was your reasoning in selecting Missy and Seco for lead roles? Both. The question says both are unknown to American audiences, but I don't think that Missy has been.
No,
around
Missy
for a
was
while.
the lead on Rookie Blue.
Right, Rookie Blue. Yeah.
For
Exactly.
6 years.
Yeah. So, but what did you see in them that you liked?
Well, Missy has just a very strong persona. That the first time I met her, I had seen Rookie Blue 2 or 3 times. Remembered, oh yeah, she was the lead, but she was brought in, and I really look. I'll tell you, it's a very strange story. It's the only actor I've ever had to offer the same part to 3 times.
Oh, wow.
That she turned it down and turned it down, and I said, this is, because she was getting married, which she's now done quite successfully. She didn't know if she wanted to be in New York, but once she came in, she went all in, and she has got a really good sense of authority. I mean, the closest actor that has that type of female aggressiveness but sensitivity is Mariska. That in that kind of point position. Seco was, to me, one of the best finds of the past 5 years for us. That to find a guy who a lot of girls think is very good looking, is 6'5", and speaks 4 languages or something.
Yeah.
Pretty good get.
Yeah. Not too shabby.
And especially now, with his knowledge of beyond Arabic, but the Quran and Muslim identity and everything else, is a very, very unique character right now on television.
For sure. Last question is, since the show is filmed in New York City and we all live in New York City, is there any way to let your fans know in advance where you will be taping so we can be extras in crowd scenes?
God, no. Sorry, but not in the cards.
Thank you all for coming. Oh, one more. Okay. Yes. Okay. Sure. Wow, this one's great. Yeah, okay, of course. The first one is today. How do you create such 3D, 3-dimensional characters? three-dimensional characters, and how do you create such strong characters that it can also be vulnerable? So your characters are three-dimensional, they're strong, but they're also vulnerable.
It goes back to what we were talking about 20 minutes ago, that I don't think that character is successfully doled out in huge doses. And the reason that it's not that you're rewarded for regular viewing, but you are. I mean, it's one of the things that if I took a Law and Order fan and asked them, how much do you know about Jeremy's character? And I don't know, except for the scene with your brother, the suicide one, that there was anything that you just sort of laid your emotions bare. But people out there can tell you a lot about that character because it came out, every 7th episode you get just the kernel. And the first season with you and Anthony, when the audience didn't know either of you, and there was real tension, was some of my favorite moments in the show. But three-dimensional, strong, I have to say, after the pilot, that's the incredible writers that we've had consistently on the shows over the years.
Yeah. I'll rephrase your question a little bit differently, this final bit. If you are a struggling actor or an actress, given that there have been so many people who have come up through Law and Order, what is the pathway to even getting a small, tiny speaking role on those shows?
Get an agent.
There you go.
No, it's the ultimate two-headed snake. You can't get a job without an agent. You can't get an agent without a job. Everybody goes through the same thing, or 99% of the acting community goes through that same journey. But you can't get in the door without an agent. It's not really discussable when you think. Look, on the 3 Law and Orders alone, the last count, there were more than 35,000 speaking roles.
Wow. 35,000 speaking roles.
Yeah, it's like a small town.
Sorry. I might need my glasses for this. Do you think it is no, I don't think so. But first of all, let me thank the audience for coming out. I appreciate it. This has been a wonderful night. And pictures of Dick 20 years ago?
Did you take him?
Oh, wow.
All right. Thank you very much. I want to thank Mr. Dick Wolf. Thank you very much, sir, for coming out.
My pleasure.
Sela Ward, Jeremy Sisto, Ebonée Noel, thank you all, and thank you for coming out and supporting, of course, the 92nd Street Y, as always. We appreciate it. Thank you.